one. Today, only 1 in 100 children goes to a boarding school, and yet, from Victorian bullies to boy wizards, we just can't get enough of them. If you can judge the character of a nation from its popular culture, then maybe, deep down, we're all public schoolboys at heart.
Boarding school stories have always been extraordinarily popular. From Billy Bunter to Harry Potter, they've never failed to find an enthusiastic audience. Like country house dramas, school stories are set in a closed world, dominated by hierarchy and tradition. And they too tend to follow a tried and tested formula. A hero is a kind of boyish everyman with an ordinary, unremarkable name: Brown, Jennings, Potter. His parents are either never seen or are removed from the action in chapter 1, so he can get on with having an adventure without anybody telling him to wash his hands for tea. And through his nervous eyes, we're introduced to a strange new world of arcane rituals, avuncular schoolmasters, and terrifying, though always cowardly, bullies. The public school story was born in the 19th century, here at Rugby School in Warwickshire. In 1828, Dr. Thomas Arnold arrived here as headmaster, and he revolutionised education not just in rugby, but in the entire public school system. And it's the sheer force of Arnold's moral vision that I think explains the lasting power of the public school story in our popular culture. Dr. Arnold was a man of extraordinary evangelical zeal. Indeed, in many ways, his was the guiding spirit of the entire Victorian age. Now, Arnold believed that education was a moral duty, and what he sought to produce were boys not just to run the growing British Empire, but to fly the flag for muscular Christianity. As Arnold himself put it, his priorities were: first, religious and moral principle; second, gentlemanly conduct; and third, academic ability. Arnold's vision of the ideal Christian gentleman was to prove tremendously influential, because one of the young men he taught was so inspired that he wrote a book based on his experiences at rugby. Tom's heart beat quick as he passed the great school field, and he began already to be proud of being a rugby boy as he passed the school gates with the oriel window above and saw the boys standing there looking as if the town belonged to them. This must be the most famous school story ever written, Tom Brown's School Days, published by Thomas Hughes in 1857. No novel in history, I think, has ever had a greater impact on the lives of generations of school children, not just in Britain, but all over the world. And it's been said that just as Charles Dickens invented Christmas, so it was Thomas Hughes who invented the public school spirit. In 1971, the BBC turned the book into a Sunday afternoon family serial. Millions tuned in to watch the coming of age of a very proper little man.
Ah, here he is now. Matron, let me introduce Brown. Brown, this is Matron.
How do you do, ma'am?
Welcome to Rugby School, Master Brown. Matron is a present help in time of trouble, so be sure and keep in her good books.
I'll do my best, ma'am.
Of course he will.
The story charts Tom's evolution from a cheeky little urchin into a sportsman, a Christian, and above all, an Englishman. Thomas Hughes once said that he wrote the book to get the chance of preaching, and it's hard to think of any book that better captures Victorian values, or that more completely embodies the essential British hero: decent, honourable, patriotic and unflappable, the perfect gentleman. There is, however, one public school character who epitomises none of those virtues. Somebody sadly expelled from rugby for blatant drunkenness, and who was, by his own account, a scoundrel, a liar, a cheat, a thief, a coward, and oh yes, a toady. And those are just the good points. His name was Harry Flashman.
For that impertinence, Brown, you get double honours. We're going to toss you until we kill you.
Harry Flashman was the bully in Tom Brown's school days, but in the 1960s, the writer George MacDonald Fraser spotted his potential, and he plucked the arch-rogue from the original novel and turned him into a grown-up arch-rogue.
I need not tell you of the dauntless heroism he displayed in Afghanistan, of the matchless gallantry of his defence of Piper's Fort.
In reviving this bully as a Victorian anti-hero, Fraser created one of the most entertaining characters in modern British fiction. And in 1975, he put Flashman on the big screen, writing the screenplay for the film Royal Flash.
Here! Take the bloody thing! I don't want it! Take it!
Fraser's Flashman is even more of a bully and a coward than ever. Still, he never lets it hold him back.
There's a British officer there, with his country's flag, nay, his country's honour, clasped to his wounded body. He's alive! Get in there, brothers!
One of the great things about the Flashman books is that even though he spends all his time running away from one imperial disaster after another, everybody else insists on believing the very best of him. So despite being a thoroughly bad egg, he ends his days as one of Victorian Britain's greatest heroes. To be fair to Flashman, though, he is very good with women and with horses. Indeed, by book 9, he's bedded almost 480 of them. Women, that is, not horses.
Lola, what?
Montes.
Lola Monte. Ain't that a Dago name? Your look's a bit Dago.
Thank you.
Why didn't you...
Harry Flashman and Tom Brown could hardly be more different, and yet both of them are unmistakably products of their times. Tom Brown, of course, is the quintessential Victorian hero, the embodiment of Christian manliness in the heyday of empire. Flashman, however, is a hero for a more cynical, post-imperial age, selfish and lecherous, his adventures shining an unsparing light on the hypocrisies of Britain's colonial past. And if you put those two characters together, the noble-hearted gentleman and the sardonic womanizer, then what you get is the best-known British hero of them all.
James Bond was a public school hero for the modern age.
Never know how much I love you. Never know how much...
A publishing sensation in the 60s, Bond became the star of the longest-running and one of the most successful film franchises of all time. But for all his gadgets, his girls, his conquests and his cocktails, he remains a supremely patrician figure. Indeed, for all his apparent classlessness, Bond was essentially a mouthpiece for his old Etonian creator, Ian Fleming.
These observations are really, of course, observations of my own, which I put into Bond's mouth.
The son of a rich Tory MP, Fleming spent much of his childhood at the family estate, Joyce Grove. And like Fleming, Bond enjoys a gilded existence. Educated at Eton, he drives a Bentley and plays for high stakes. From the start, Fleming wanted David Niven to play his gentleman spy, but he didn't get his way.
The producers of the first Bond film were very anxious that worldwide audiences might be put off by an upper-class English gent. So they looked for somebody harder, tougher, a cold-blooded killer, not a simpering fop.
Anybody want a dainty custard cream? Yeah.
They picked someone completely different, a muscular milkman from the tenements of Edinburgh. Connery had the look, but not the manners. So the producers handed him over to Terence Young, the public school-educated director of the first Bond film, and he gave Connery a makeover. Young took him to his Savile Row tailor and got him a suit. He took him to dinner and showed him how to talk, how to walk, and even how to eat.
What Terence Young did was to transform Sean Connery into the suave establishment hero that James Bond remains today. And so a Scottish bodybuilder became the ultimate gentleman adventurer.
Howdy.
May we call your attention to Mr. Bond's impeccable tailoring from London's Savile Row? The shirt is of hand-tailored Indian madras. Also the cravat, hand-woven of Javanese batik, is 007.
If you carry a 00 number, it means you're licensed to kill.
Now, properly attired, Connery's Bond was ready to enjoy the high life.
Deluxe travel.
Something hugely attractive and unimaginably glamorous to audiences in the early 60s. Connery was not quite the idea I had of Bond, said Ian Fleming, but he would be if I wrote the books over again.
I have to leave immediately.
Just as things were getting interesting again.
After Connery finally hung up his Walter PPK, the series started to acquire more and more of Harry Flashman's irrepressible patrician style. So to me, Roger Moore's Bond is basically the embodiment of effortless superiority, an unreconstructed imperial hero with an eyebrow knowingly raised and a quip for every occasion. All that's really missing are the bushy whiskers and the flashing sabre.
And in The Spy Who Loved Me, Moore's Bond has never been more splendidly Flashman-esque.
007, Triple X. Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British end up, sir.
Nobody does it better.
Not only is Roger Moore's Bond much funnier than Connery's, he's also even more patrician. And far from disguising their hero's upper-class background, later Bond films placed it centre stage. In Skyfall, we finally get to see James Bond's ancestral home, an imposing Scottish manor house, complete with staff.
This is Kincaid, gamekeeper here since I was a boy.
Pleased to meet you, Emma.
Mr. Kincaid.
The truth is that apart from his womanising, Britain's greatest fictional hero might have been written in the 1850s, a public schoolboy taking on the bullies on behalf of a grateful nation. Yet right from the beginning, Bond was a fantasy. Even as Fleming's first books hit the shelves, Britain's power was fast ebbing away. Bond was an imperial hero for a country without an empire. And the collapse of British prestige was to have unexpected cultural consequences.